All right, everyone, welcome back. Ready for another deep dive. This one might surprise you a little bit. We got this suggestion to look into a website called Cheap ABA. Now, those of you familiar with the autism world probably know it.
Right, practical stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Tips for parents, resources, that sort of thing. But one of their articles went in a direction I was not expecting. It's about, well, mediumship, like actual psychics and stuff.
Yeah, I saw that one too. Definitely caught my attention.
So our mission this time is to figure out, is there really some connection between autism and mediumship? Or is this just a fringe idea?
Well, let's see. Cheat ABA basically suggests that some of the traits we see in autistic folks could actually be signs of them being more sensitive to, like, unseen energies.
Hmm.
The article uses the term psi-abilities, which is kind of a catch-all for things like telepathy, clairvoyance, that kind of stuff.
Okay, got to be honest. Not what I usually think of when we talk about autism. So how do they even make that connection? How do they bridge that gap?
So they're not saying that if you're autistic, you're automatically psychic. Got to make that clear right away. What they are saying is the same neurological differences that cause, say, sensory sensitivities or make someone really good at pattern recognition, that same wiring might also make them more open to picking up on things other people miss.
Okay, so the brain's just processing info differently. And maybe some of that info is stuff most of us are tuned out of.
Right. And science hasn't exactly embraced the whole psi-abilities thing yet.
Yeah, lots of debate there.
Definitely. But Cheap ABA is kind of sidestepping that debate for now. They're just saying, hey, look, this is an interesting idea worth exploring, especially for autistic people themselves who might already feel like they experience the world differently.
Makes sense to me. Don't shut down possibilities before you even look at them.
Exactly. And they actually bring up some historical examples. Throughout history, people labeled as different neurologically speaking. They were sometimes seen as having spiritual connections.
Oh, like shamans, oracles, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Could some of those individuals have been on the autism spectrum? Back then, they wouldn't have had a name for it, of course. It's an interesting thought, isn't it?
It really is. And, thinking about it, autistic people do tend to notice details others don't. The article even mentions that specifically, how that could be useful for, say, a medium trying to pick up on subtle signs or interpret messages.
It all ties together. And, there are potential benefits that Cheap ABA points out, specifically for autistic people. Like, if you've always been told your autism is a problem, finding this other way of looking at it where your traits are actually valuable could be huge for someone.
Yeah, finding purpose, feeling like you belong, big stuff.
Exactly. And they also talk about emotional regulation, which we know can be a big challenge for a lot of autistic folks. But what if connecting to something bigger, something spiritual, could actually help with that, provide some calm, some focus?
Intriguing. So not just about the abilities themselves, but how this whole concept of mediumship could positively impact an autistic person's life.
Right. Almost like instead of just focusing on what autistic people lack compared to, quote unquote normal, what if we started looking at the strengths their different wiring might give them?
Flipping the script, I like it.
And Cheap ABA even has some tips on how to actually explore mediumship. They talk about trusting your intuition, mindfulness meditation, finding good mentors, stuff like that.
Okay, I'm hooked. Tell me more about those tips. But we'll have to save that for part 2 of our deep dive.
Don't go anywhere, folks. This is getting good.
All right, so we're back and ready to dig into those tips from Cheap ABA on exploring mediumship, especially with this possible autism connection in mind.
Definitely. I'm all ears. Where do they even suggest starting?
Well, one thing they emphasize right away is grounding, like literally feeling centered in your body.
Grounding. Okay. Is that like, I don't know, some kind of meditation thing?
It can be. It's about being really present, feeling your physical self, your connection to, well, the ground.
They're not spacing out, basically. Exactly. Which makes sense, right? If we're talking about autistic folks who might already have sensory sensitivities, you wouldn't want to add to that by feeling like floaty or disconnected.
Yeah, I can see how that'd be important. So, but like deep breathing, that kind of thing.
They mention that. Also, spending time in nature or even just consciously focusing on, say, the feeling of your feet on the floor.
Simple stuff, but powerful, maybe.
It's about finding what works for you to feel solid, calm, in control. Then once you've got that foundation, Cheap ABA talks about different ways to actually connect with, well, spirit.
Okay, here comes the spooky stuff.
Well, not necessarily spooky, but yeah, they suggest things like pendulums, automatic writing, even just paying close attention to your dreams.
Okay, I've heard of those, but honestly never tried any of them. What's automatic writing exactly?
So you basically relax, quiet your mind, and just let your hand move across the paper. The idea is you're not consciously controlling what you write.
So,
Yeah.
what, messages from the beyond?
Some people believe that. Others say it's more like your subconscious mind coming through. Cheap ABA doesn't really take a firm stance on where the info comes from, just that it can be a way to tap into something deeper.
Interesting. What about pendulums? Those always seem kind of mysterious to me.
Pretty simple, actually. It's a weighted object on a string. You hold it, ask a question, and the way it swings supposedly gives you a yes or no answer.
Hmm. So it's not like the pendulum itself is magical, but it's helping you access, what, intuition?
Yeah,
Something like that?
that's the idea, amplifying subtle signals we might miss otherwise. Now, all this talk of, spirits and unseen forces, I'm sure some folks listening are a bit skeptical, maybe even worried.
Yeah, like, is this safe?
Yeah.
Especially if we're talking about people who are already sensitive in different ways.
Right, and Cheap ABA addresses that. They say straight up, look, not everything you encounter out there is going to be friendly or helpful, which is why they stress discernment. Big time.
So, like, being able to tell the good vibes from the bad vibes.
Yeah. Basically. Trusting your gut. They even compare it to exploring a new place. You gotta be aware of potential dangers, right?
Makes sense. But how do you even do that when we're talking about, like, energies and stuff? That's where I get lost.
Well, they give some practical advice. For example, setting really clear boundaries.
Boundaries, like with ghosts. I don't even know how that works.
Think of it more like energetic boundaries. You're in control. You decide what you're open to, what you're not. And they talk about working with protective energies, too.
Okay, so, like, calling on your guardian angel, that kind of thing.
Some people do that, yeah. Visualizing white light around you, working with crystals,
Yeah.
whatever feels safe and powerful to you.
Creating a safe space,
Yeah.
mentally and spiritually, before you even start.
Exactly. Which, again, could be super helpful for autistic folks who might benefit from that extra sense of control in a world that can feel overwhelming.
It's almost like these tips aren't just for mediumship, right? Grounding, boundaries, intuition. That's good life advice in general.
I agree. And it circles back to what we were saying earlier. What if some of the things that make autistic people different are actually strengths in disguise? Especially when it comes to this kind of exploration.
I like where this is going.
Yeah.
But I got to admit, still lots of questions about the actual how-to of mediumship. What are some specific things Cheap ABA recommends? That's what I'm really curious about now. Okay, so we're back. Ready for more of those mediumship tips from Cheap ABA.
All right, picking up where we left off. So they really stress this idea of discernment,
Discernment, God.
not just believing everything you hear or sense, especially when you're first starting out.
Like, not every spirit is Casper the Friendly Ghost, right?
Exactly. Some might be more like, well, not so friendly. And Cheap ABA points out some autistic folks might be more trusting or take things literally, so it's extra important.
Yeah, makes sense. Being cautious.
Right. They say pay attention to your body, too. If something feels off, unsettling, trust that feeling. Doesn't matter if some book says it's supposed to feel good.
So if I get the chills, but not in a good way, that's my cue to nope out of there.
Pretty much. They also talk about setting intentions, like why are you even exploring this? What do you hope to get out of it?
Interesting. So if I'm really looking for, say, guidance from helpful spirits, maybe that helps filter out the rest.
Could be. It's like setting the rules of the game before you start playing. And they talk about protection, too.
Okay, this is where I always get a bit lost. Like, how do you protect yourself from something you can't even see?
Well, it's more about the energy of it. Cheap ABA suggests things like visualizing white light around you or working with crystals, if that resonates.
Okay, so creating a safe space, energetically, like how we talked about grounding earlier, to feel safe physically.
It all ties together. And actually, they also recommend having a physical space, too, for your practice. Somewhere you feel comfortable, not distracted.
Makes sense. Can't connect with the spirit world if your phone's buzzing every 5 seconds, right?
Exactly. You know, as we're going through these tips, it strikes me, a lot of this isn't just for aspiring mediums, is it?
Now that you mention it, yeah. Grounding, boundaries, trusting your gut.
Yeah.
That's good advice for anyone, especially in this world.
And especially, I'd say, for autistic people.
Yeah.
Who are often told to, mask their traits, fit in. But here, it's like those traits are actually valuable.
Yeah, it's almost like Cheap ABA is giving us this whole toolkit for not just mediumship, but for self-care, for being you.
And embracing that you, even if it's different. Which brings us back to that core idea, neurodiversity as a strength, not a deficit. maybe those sensitivities that some people see as a problem are actually a way to perceive more, experience more deeply.
It's a pretty powerful idea when you think about it. Like, what if the things that make autistic people different are actually keys to unlocking something amazing?
Makes you wonder, doesn't it? What if we've been so focused on trying to make everyone fit the same mold that we've missed out on whole other ways of being, of understanding the world?
This deep dive has really blown my mind, gotta say. Even if I'm not running out to buy a crystal ball just yet, it's made me think about autism, about spirituality, even just about human potential in a whole new way.
Me too. It's like there's so much more to reality than what we can see and measure, you know? And maybe, just maybe, autistic individuals are holding some of the keys to unlock those mysteries.
Now, that's a thought to leave our listeners with. So whether you're on the spectrum or know someone who is, or just curious about exploring different possibilities, remember to stay open-minded, trust your own experiences, and never stop questioning.
And hey, if this deep dive sparks something in you, let us know. We love hearing from you. Until next time, keep those minds open, keep those hearts curious.